The creation of life is sacred. For First Nations people, it marks the beginning of a new journey.
Stipaitapi in the Blackfoot language means source of life. You are spirit coming into this world. You were put into the circle by the Creator, who is a spirit.
Traditional teachings say that the child chose you as their parent because of what you can offer. The tie between parent and child is one of unconditional love and acceptance. They are a gift from our Creator. As parents, family, and friends, it is our responsibility to nurture them, to help them develop the way it is intended. It is important to do everything we can to protect our children. That's why it's important to talk about sudden infant death syndrome. Sudden infant death syndrome, or SIDS, is the term used when a baby dies suddenly, for no obvious reason. Although factors such as the environment and the baby's own development can be attributed to SIDS, other circumstances like poverty, high rates of smoking, and poor health education can also be listed as factors. However, the exact cause of sudden infant death syndrome is still not known.
SIDS is defined as the unexpected death of an infant under 1 year of age. The cause of death is unexplained, and we have to sort of prove this by autopsy and examination of the death scene and kind of a review of their medical history.
In the days before medical advances, the death of a baby was seen as a sign of poor parenting, or of not paying attention to a baby's spiritual, physical, and emotional needs. However, research into sudden infant death syndrome indicates that SIDS likely results from a complex interplay of physiological, developmental, environmental, and circumstantial factors. The exact contribution of each one of these in a child's death is still not understood. While there is no way to prevent SIDS from occurring, there are ways to reduce the risk of infants dying from sudden infant death syndrome. For our First Nations communities, the message is important. Statistics say that many more First Nations babies die from SIDS than non-native babies. In fact, sudden infant death in the Aboriginal population in Canada is up to 8 times greater than the national average, a telling statistic. In part, lifestyle may contribute to this statistic. The rate of smoking, for example, amongst First Nations people is high. Cigarette smoke puts babies at risk of respiratory infection and also increases the risk of the baby dying from SIDS. Parents, aunties, uncles, babysitters, grandparents need to be told they cannot smoke around you while you are pregnant and after your new baby is born.
Cigarette smoke is detrimental to a developing fetus and to all children, including babies. There are toxins that are transmitted to the fetus that potentially could harm the fetus. They also find that cigarette smoke can irritate the lungs of the newborn baby. And finally, the carbon monoxide that binds very tightly to our hemoglobin will make the amount of oxygen in the fetus and the baby lower.
We do have a very high smoking rate in our Indigenous communities, and we don't seem to be as conscientious about how smoking affects our children compared to what the general population. They've had a lot of education. But we've had a bit of confusion in terms of traditional use and non-traditional use of tobacco. So there definitely needs to be a greater understanding in our communities regarding the effects of smoke, and not just smoking, but the secondhand smoke. There needs to be more traditional teaching, understanding why we use certain things in the past and how they can benefit us. And maybe not everything we could bring to utilize today, but there are certain teachings and there are certain ways of doing things that were appropriate and work very well, but we've abandoned them for whatever reason. Particularly around children. There was a lot of ceremony in receiving children when they were born, and so then there's a different attitude and appreciation for children. Nowadays, we give birth to our children in the hospital. There isn't any specific attention paid to even the afterbirth. It's usually taken and they don't see it anymore, so there's no understanding of the significance of that. And the ceremonies around even the umbilical cord, placing it in a sacred place, and how that's a connection that the mother and the child had. So those kinds of things, I think, need to be reintroduced in family relationships and child rearing.
Traditional, as well as more contemporary teachings, strive to keep our children safe. In terms of SIDS, it means always being aware of ways of reducing the risk. But there needs to be discussion, and most communities have someone available to go to talk about SIDS.
Most communities have the informal structures. They're not necessarily recognized. But we have, whether they be clan mothers or medicine women or women that are very specifically in communities who are known to give advice or support, and the same goes for elderly men. There are men or medicine men there that you can go to for help. I think literature reading is really important, especially if you can read. And if you can't read, then talking about it. Going to somebody that you know that you can talk to about it and express your feelings to.
When I lost my baby, I had a really hard time with it because I wasn't allowed to grieve like the way I wanted to. I wasn't allowed to grieve. I was told not to cry, and so that made it really hard.
And I know others who have experienced SIDS or any other kind of death most oftentimes will reach out to help other human beings because they have then an understanding of that pain and can be more empathetic or understanding and helpful to other people.
I had a friend at that time, and she had lost her little daughter at 2 years old, and it was like when it happened, she was right there, and she was like, she stayed by me, and I really felt close to her because she knew what I was going through, and that was really helpful. And I really got a lot of support from her. And just knowing that she knew how I was feeling and wasn't like judging me or whatever.
Some practices, which many First Nations people might consider to be traditional, are not. Sleeping with your baby beside you in your bed is an example.
We do know that there are significant psychologic bonding type benefits to sleeping with a child, okay, that both the child and the parents receive. But if we go back to our studies, so we have a baseline of some studies here that say that sleeping on the tummy is risky for SIDS, having obstructive, loose, soft bedding, any pillows and toys and stuff, and parents for that matter, which may obstruct the airway, which may allow the child to rebreathe its own carbon dioxide. Those are risks.
For years and years, we've always slept with our babies. But the difference between now and then is that babies were swaddled. They were in cradle boards or in moss bags. And so the chances of laying on a child are not like it is today when they're completely unswaddled or unwrapped. And generally also babies, when they were swaddled or in the cradle beds, they were hung up.
If a parent chooses to co-sleep with their infant, they should follow risk reduction strategies, particularly avoiding the use of drugs, cigarettes, or alcohol. If your baby sleeps in his or her own crib, make sure the mattress is firm and place the baby's feet against the end of the crib. The chance of baby moving around too much is reduced in this position. Remove soft toys and plush blankets. Always make sure that your baby is laid on his or her back. Never place your baby to sleep on their side or on their tummy.
It is important that the child sleeps on his or her back because it has been found over a few studies in multiple countries that if you lay a child on its back to sleep, that the incidence of SIDS decreases significantly from 20 to 50%. Okay, we don't really know why. Okay, and there are some theories out there, and the theories are that if a child lays on its tummy, the child can rebreathe its own oxygen, its own expired breath, so therefore the child will have more carbon dioxide, which will decrease the drive to breathe, and then they stop breathing and die. That's one. The other theory behind that is that the child obstructs its airway lying on its tummy, and then they die. The other theory behind that is that with lying on their tummy, they have an increased temperature, which has some interaction with the regulation of breathing. Is it some way a factor in SIDS?
Breastfeeding your baby is a move towards strengthening the bond between mother and child. And there are nutritional and developmental advantages as well. But there's more to it than that. Breastfeeding is also seen as a way of reducing the risk of SIDS.
Breastfeeding is important. It's probably logical to think that it should make a difference because it provides a nice physiologic and psychologic environment for the mama and the baby. So it should be beneficial in that regard.
Keeping a baby warm and comfortable is important. However, overwrapping your baby increases the possibility that SIDS may occur. Do not overheat an infant. A good rule to determine the comfort of a baby when putting them to sleep is, if the room temperature is right for you, it's also right for the baby. Use lightweight blankets that can be taken away or added.
Basically, what these studies in the past has shown, that if we overheat the child, that there's a higher incidence of SIDS. So we kind of extrapolate from there that maybe we should not put too many layers of clothes. I think there's two factors there: is the heat, the thermal stress that the child may potentially have, as well as are these blankets obstructing the airways, and if the child does happen to roll over and turn onto its tummy, will they obstruct and cause the child to rebreathe its carbon dioxide and pass away?
Following these strategies will not only reduce the risk of SIDS, it will enhance the general health of your baby. But remember, while these suggestions are seen as ways of reducing the risk that your baby will die from SIDS, there are no guarantees. As a parent, relative, or caregiver, you may feel like you did everything right, but the possibility still exists.
And I think, well, why did I was a good mom, and I didn't do anything wrong, and there's other, moms out there doing things that I would never do, and, so why did it have to be my child?
Research into sudden infant death syndrome continues. Following the suggestions given in this program can help to ensure that your baby will grow into a wonderful toddler, child, and beyond.
I think that we can reduce the risk of SIDS in in your infant by some simple things. Smoking is a hazardous thing. The position that you put your child in, it is important that the child sleeps on his or her back, and maintaining a healthy sleep environment with no, stuffed toys and pillows and fluffy stuff in the area. That'll go a long way to minimizing the risk of SIDS in your infant.
Help your baby on their journey through the circle of life. Help to reduce the risk of SIDS. For more information on sudden infant death syndrome and for peer support, call toll-free 1-800-END-SIDS.